centrally, alternatively between Malacca and Singapore, but they are governed collectively as one administrative bloc. And the chain of governance begins in London, it then goes to British India, Madras or Bombay, and then the chain of command extends all the way down to Singapore and Malacca. The three state settlements become a cohesive administrative bloc. It has its own currency, it has its own stamp, and that's why you still find in the antique shops stamps saying Strait Settlements. It doesn't define which part, either Singapore, Malacca or Penang, because the three were ruled as one. This also introduces something rather new in the political makeup of the Malay world, because you then have three disparate parts of the peninsula historically that have been distinct from each other. Penang has always been part of Kedah, Singapore has been part of the Johor Riau Empire, Malacca was a kingdom in itself, but now governed for the first time as one. But what is interesting is that within the Strait Settlements, because the law of the land, the law of the day is British commercial law, secular law, it creates a very different sort of social milieu. It's around this time, particularly when Stafford Raffles was in power, that we begin to see mass migration, not only of non-Muslim migrants, Tamils from Tamil Nadu, Kerala, South India, but also Chinese coming from mainland China, who are being brought in to serve what will later become a racialized plural economy in Malaya. But we also begin to see the influx of independent migrants, and this is crucial. Independent migrants who then can come to the Strait Settlements, settle there, without being part of the bonded labor or the indentured labor system. So we begin to see influx of large numbers of Indian Muslim merchants from North India, Pathans, Punjabis, Bengalis coming here, settling in places like Penang, Malacca and Singapore. Incidentally, if you recall when I talked about the Tabligh Jamaat network across Southeast Asia sprung up really from the descendants of this first generation of independent migrants. But what happens then when you look at the social milieu of the Strait Settlements is that these end up being very mixed, hybrid, cosmopolitan societies. Because compared to the racial and ethnic makeup of the mainland kingdoms, the Strait Settlements, you found large numbers of Europeans, Eurasians, Malays, Chinese, Indians, Arabs, people of all communities. Penang, for instance, even had a small Jewish community at one point. We all know the history of the Armenian community. This is where they settled. They settled in Penang, and then Malacca, and then Singapore. They built the Raffles Hotel in Singapore and the E&O Hotel in Penang. So these societies, in time, within a space of only half a century, developed to be very, very different polities compared to the mainland Malay kingdoms. I do a lot of pictorial archiving in my work, and I used to buy old antique copies of the London Illustrated News, which is actually a very good source of visual information. And if you look at the drawings, no photos in those days, but if you look at the drawings in London Illustrated News, look at the scenes of social life in Penang, Malacca and Singapore. It's quite astounding. They look like a scene from, I don't know, Gato Pardo or The Leopard or something, balls at midnight, emergence of a completely eclectic hybrid society where even in terms of sartorial norms, in terms of dress, you began to see Peranakan Chinese dressed in tuxedos, Europeans going native wearing sarongs. That sort of eclectic mix emerged in these three Strait Settlements. Now, in this context, we have to remember one thing. The percentage representation of Malay Muslims in Penang, Malacca and Singapore therefore dropped. They dropped simply because of the influx of mass migrants. And so this led to a peculiar situation where you had Malay Muslims and Peranakan Muslims. This included the Malay Arabs, Malay Indians, Malay Javanese hybrids, who for the first time in history were actually minorities in quote-unquote their own land. And it produced an anxiety on their part. an anxiety in terms of being minorities living under colonial rule, under secular law, secular commercial law, and two, at the same time feeling themselves to be outnumbered and outclassed by newly arriving migrant communities who were economically more aggressive. So it's not a surprise that by the late 19th century, precisely in Penang, Malacca, and Singapore, you began to see the emergence of a new generation of Malay Muslim community leaders, men like Syed Sheikh Al-Hadi, men like Syed Tahir Jamaluddin. These would later become the first generation of the Peninsular Malaysian kaum muda, the younger generation of reformers.
Can I ask a question? Prior to the Straits settlements, was there any sense of national unity in the whole